आपका इंटरेस्ट कैसे बना इस फील्ड में, आपने कॉलेज कैसे चूज किया एंड सब्जेक्ट कौन कौन से लर्न किए स्पेसिफिक टू साइबर सिक्योरिटी इन कॉलेज? इंटर्नशिप कॉलेज में करी, उसका एक्सपीरियंस बताइए, कहाँ पे करी, क्या काम किया, कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट में आपने वर्क किया उसमें। सो आपका प्लेसमेंट एक्सपीरियंस कैसा है कि आपने कॉलेज से ली कि बाहर से ली कि प्री प्लेसमेंट ऑफर मिल गया आपको? तो आपने कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट पे काम किया, क्या होता है डेवसेकऑप्स में, बेसिकली करना क्या होता है डेवसेकऑप्स इंजीनियर्स को? तो आपने सेकंड कंपनी क्लाउडल ज्वाइन करी, वहाँ पे एज अ क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी स्पेशलिस्ट काम किया, तो वहाँ पे आपने कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट में काम किया, तो वो कितना डिफरेंट था बाकी प्रीवियस काम से, और वहाँ पे क्या किया क्रेड में, आप क्या काम कर रहे हो रिसेंटली? तो आपने कौन कौन सी टूल्स और टेक्नोलॉजी पे काम कर रहे हैं आप रिसेंटली इन क्रेड? तो आपका इंटरव्यू एक्सपीरियंस कैसा रहा कि डोमेन चेंज करने में कितनी डिफिकल्टीज आई, क्या क्या क्वेश्चन टैकल हुए आपको जब आपने डेवसेकऑप्स से क्लाउड में एंट्री मारी? वर्क कल्चर कैसा रहता है कि प्रोडक्ट कंपनी आपके प्रोस्पेक्टिव में कैसी रहती है, और सर्विस बेस्ड कितना लर्निंग प्रोस्पेक्टिव रहता है कि आप कहाँ ज़्यादा सीख पाते हैं? तो इन योर प्रोस्पेक्टिव व्हाई एंड व्हेन टू चेंज एनी कंपनी, व्हाट सर्टिफिकेशन यू डिड और विच कॉन्फ्रेंसेज यू अटेंड एंड टॉक, आप कौन कौन से रिसोर्सेज फॉलो करते हैं लर्न न्यू थिंग्स के? वन लास्ट क्वेश्चन, कौन कौन सी चीज़ें बिगनर्स को करनी चाहिए और जो सिक्योरिटी डोमेन में नहीं है? हेलो गाइस, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आई एम योर होस्ट नितिश। आई एम अ सॉक एनालिस्ट एट बिरलासॉफ्ट। आज के हमारे गेस्ट हैं आयुष। ही इज एट क्रेड एज अ क्लाउड एंड डेटा सिक्योरिटी इंजीनियर। आज हम इनकी जर्नी के बारे में जानेंगे। सो हाय आयुष, हाउ आर यू? प्लीज इंट्रोड्यूस योरसेल्फ।
Hi Nitish, you kind of introduced me, but yeah, so I work at Cred. I work as a cloud and data security engineer, which is essentially like saying that I take care of all the infrastructure that's on cloud, ensure that it's secure, and also the data security requirements, as in any access to the data or data itself is stored and maintained in a secure manner.
आपका इंटरेस्ट कैसे बना इस फील्ड में, आपने कॉलेज कैसे चूज किया एंड कॉलेज?
Interest, funnily enough, was like a little, I don't know, too early maybe. So it was class 8th. Okay. When it was the first time, we were like, there were always like computer courses and whatnot, but they'll teach us all sorts of random things like Excel, Word, and everything but about computers basically. So 8th mein, for some fortune of luck, we got introduced to programming. Okay. And I was very amazed ki wow, like all this while the computer has been asking me like ki ye install karna hai ki nahi and everything, but now I can tell it to like do stuff, right? Like when I say like hey print this, it prints that, add this, it adds that, gives me the sum and whatnot. So that intrigued me a lot towards computers in general. And I don't know if it was my mischievous uh tendencies or whatever, but I also like to like get stuff and then break them apart, which is like true for like physical stuff as well. The amount of toys I've broken to just get magnets out of them and like rewire them and do all sorts of random things is like just crazy. So I think that tendency was there, but to be very honest, I didn't actively pursue it as such during school, of course. uh, Eventually I went to VIT Vellore. Deciding the college itself was not like a very big influence on कि यहाँ पर like there's cyber security course as such, और यहाँ पर there was at the time as well, but I chose the core CS branch for myself. The good thing is कि there's a lot of communities and clubs and chapters, as we call them, in the in VIT. So there's a lot of them there, and some of them are like really great. One of them being GDG VIT, which is now currently known as GDSC VIT. There's some naming change there. GDG is basically Google Developer Groups. So वहाँ पर I got to meet a couple of really nice folks who not only helped me upskill in like development, but security itself. So like most folks do, I also started off on the offsec side of things, like API or like injections and whatnot. And that's kind of where it all started for me in college, you can say.
ओके ओके, तो आपने निंजा CTF के बारे में?
Ninja CTF, right?
या
The thing is, I mean, so Ninja CTF was CTF capture the flag contest. I'm assuming your audience would typically know what a CTF is, but for if in just in case they don't, CTF is basically a think of it as a hackathon, but for hackers, where we actually build synthetic applications with synthetic vulnerabilities. You can say that. So for example, there is a thing called MySQL injection or SQL injection, where you inject some like payload into a SQL query, which evidently does some thing it was not intended to do. For example, do a data dump for you, right? So that's an SQL injection. So in a CTF, you'd build a challenge that would have intentionally have that vulnerability. And at the end of the challenge, like if you were able to successfully exploit it, you'll get a flag, which you can like put into the platform to get some points, and then eventually you win on maximum points and whatnot. So CTFs are a really nice way to like kind of challenge yourself also, because it's easy to like at times find bugs. For example, old websites, you can probably just copy paste and dump a lot of payloads readily available on the internet. But to actually be able to like build that is a challenge in itself. So you learn around about caveats as well while developing a challenge, because you yourself will be writing code, not just exploiting someone else's code, right? So I took it up as a challenge to build some certain like CTF challenges around like different kinds of domains. I mean, I don't even remember what all I've built right now, but some of them were based around DNS, some of them were around WebAssembly and stuff like that, basically. So I took it up as a challenge to just like use it as a way to like crash course myself into learning new kind of vulnerabilities and stuff.
ओके ओके, सो आपने सब्जेक्ट कौन कौन से लर्न किए स्पेसिफिक टू साइबर सिक्योरिटी इन कॉलेज, और कह सकते हैं ये चीज़ें तो सब्जेक्ट आपको इम्पोर्टेंट पढ़ने ही चाहिए कॉलेज में, सिक्योरिटी स्पेसिफिक आनी ही चाहिए.
So I have a very radical take on this. I'm not sure if I should say it or not, but so the thing is ki there are good subjects like in all colleges, like syllabus is built that way, but it's the execution of the professor at the end of the day that will make it or break it essentially for you. So I don't know, over the course of however many subjects I took, sure I learned like every bit of them. Uh, I mean, I maintained a sort of decent GPA, CGPA, whatever you want to call it. But the issue with that is ki a lot of it was just like fire and forget types. Like once the subject was done, I wouldn't remember stuff. But there are some subjects that I really loved. Incredibly enough, none of them were like security related. So OS, I mean,
Like what?
in a way, but like OS was one of them. So I really love that subject on the whole methodology behind how an OS is built. I tried to build my bare bones OS as well. So that was a fun project. Network communication. So again, like you can kind of say ki these can be like foundational steps for you to learn security. But if you're just asking me about subjects that you should definitely like, even if like let's say a professor is something someone that may not be able is not able to like make it super interesting for you, that's perfectly fine. But if you have to focus, I would definitely say network and communication would definitely be one, especially if you're talking about cloud, because a lot of people now want to like be cloud security engineers. So it's kind of like the whole generation is now transcending into like from being this I want to be this hacker that breaks application to hey, I want to be a cloud security engineer. And I've personally noticed that they like at times lack what it actually means at times, because it's not offensive for the most part. This role particularly is more of a defensive thing, where you would audit a cloud, let's say account, for example, AWS, figure out issues that exist. And as you get senior, you don't just check on the misconfigurations, but you think about automated remediation. You'd think about automated monitoring, alerting. You'd even think about like putting security in the architecture phase itself. So that's how you grow. But again, like network and communication will serve as the base for all of it, because you will be dealing with network traffic at the end of the day, subnets, creating them, how different subnets would interact with each other, CIDR notation and everything. So bare bones, but it would be something that you should know. Same goes for OS. OS, like how a process works itself is a very interesting thing. And again, like as a cloud sec engineer, you will be working with servers day in, day out in one way or the other. So it really helps that way as well. If you get a chance and if your college does have that thing as a subject, then you should probably take a look at if they have a specific subject called network security. So you have some base in security as well when it comes to network. Hey, this is some okay, network, I understood it, but how do I actually go about securing it, and how do I develop that mental model of what is supposed to be secure when we are talking about network, and on the different 7 layers of the OSI, I mean OSI layers that we kind of read about, like everybody who's preparing for an interview right now, or I mean like placements, would definitely remember all 7 OSI layers from like physical to the end wala.
application.
I might forget it at times, but they never do. The thing is ki, you should know how to secure each of those layers, and wherever possible, and what pertains to you and what doesn't pertain to you, right? So that's the network security part. And if possible, also take some vulnerability assessment, penetration testing kind of a course if it's available. Because to be a good defender, you may not need to be an expert in exploitation or like an expert in actual penetration testing itself, but it would help immensely if you do know them. For example, if you do not know, let's say what an metadata endpoint within the server is, right? There is it wouldn't just click in your head to that could be a thing where we need to secure it as well. So when you read about, hey, there is this thing called secure server side request forgery, SSRF, right? And if it's done on a EC2 instance on an AWS, for example, there is a possibility of credential exfiltration via the metadata endpoint. Because you know that path, now that is something that you'll also look at. Without SSRF, you might not have looked at it, or might have missed it as well. And it also helps to develop a lot of context. For example, if your server doesn't run any application, it's just running some automation that's not using any user controlled string, so there is no input as such, it's just some, let's say, some script running there, right? In that case, you can probably also leave out updating metadata endpoint to v2 instead of using the default v1, because there's very little chance of it actually being exploited, right? So that context building is also important on whether all sorts of attacks exist, but does it pertain, or in my scenario, does this particular attack vector make sense or not in the first place?
So आपने इंटर्नशिप कॉलेज में करी, उसका एक्सपीरियंस बताइए, कहाँ पे करी, क्या काम किया, कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट में आपने वर्क किया उसमें?
My first internship technically was a software development thing. So it was nothing to do with security. So let's just keep it aside. The second one was at Appsecco itself, where I eventually joined full time as well. So Appsecco I was working on building CI/CD pipelines and security integrated within secure CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins, and security of the pipelines themselves. So, for example, if you're building a package or an application, or deploying an application via Jenkins or CI/CD in general, the point of it was to do it in a general fashion. But for the sake of the internship, I chose Jenkins, as also recommended by my mentors there, right? So the primary goal was to like build an fully functional end-to-end pipeline where I would perform all sorts of testing, not for the sake of actually like what do you want to call it? Like, so all sorts of testing that you can do doesn't always make sense, right? Plus, there are different ways to do it. Like you can do it sequentially. Ki if this security test fails, I'll fail the entire pipeline. But that starts to be a blocker for, let's say, when the development team or developer team, engineering team kind of wants to deploy an application for testing, for example. So these caveats and whatnot is something that I kind of understood while working on that project. And yeah, that was pretty much it. I actually have published an entire journey of that internship into like summarized into somewhat of a Git book. I don't remember what it's exactly called. But I've documented every single thing that I've done, issues that I was facing, how I ended up solving them, methodology behind like picking picking one tool out of the 5 tools that did one job. For example, for SAST, there could be 5 tools, and why I picked the two that I wanted to work with and everything. Including granular details like why I picked the OS as Ubuntu in the first place and not, let's say, Debian or something else. So
Okay.
I might be able to share that link with you, and
Yeah,
you can
sure,
probably
sure.
just tag it along somewhere.
तो आपका प्लेसमेंट एक्सपीरियंस कैसा है कि आपने कॉलेज से ली कि बाहर से ली कि प्री प्लेसमेंट ऑफर मिल गया आपको?
So this internship I did in 2019, I believe,
ओके.
and उस समय I had just finished my sixth semester. ठीक है. So no, there was no pre-placement PPO basically उस समय पर. Because I still had like a year left, so it didn't make sense for them, which is perfectly fine, like understandably so, to like give me a PPO at that time. So coming back to the seventh semester, when it's basically the placement season at our place in VIT. तो वहां पर I actually chose not to sit in placements because I mean it
Same,
sounds
same as me.
right.
I also did the
So,
same.
I mean I my rationale was a little too extremist that if I have a safety net for myself, so the like context here is ki, most of the companies that would come on campus, at least till I was there, like if 100 companies came, maybe 5 would be looking for a security focused role, and even in that case it might not be what I wanted to do. So I at this time was already thinking about doing something in cloud security instead of the like again application security side of things. uh, so I chose ki theek hai, if it takes extra effort let it be, but I will look for a job myself, which in I mean right now I can say ki it was a good decision, but at that time it was extremely stressful as well, because it was just too much work to like actually send so and so message, customize let's say your
Yeah, CV.
cover letter, exactly, cover letter, resume to like different companies, different profiles, and uh, it was just crazy. Now I am like done with it, but even when I
बट
like
आपको
suggested
रियल
it
वर्थ भी आपको वहीं पे मिलती बाहर. कॉलेज में तो आपका फिक्स रहता है.
100%.
कॉलेज में तो
So
आपका फिक्स रहता है कि इतने पे लेके
बिल्कुल
जाएगा.
बिल्कुल like 100% true. So what I've realized something is like because engineering colleges in India is like again maybe slightly controversial opinion, but the problem is ki many of them just end up in engineering some or the other way, and you can call it somewhat of an elevated level of school if you think about it. Like I mean it's just like different from school. Like you have, of course, you have a whole different degree of freedom, but it's something that most people like. If you just like threw someone engineering and like, "Ki, can you do this?" Typically, the answer would be yes. So many people eventually figure out what they want to do during the course of their like actual engineering course. So a lot of my friends went to like different colleges, did like photography masters and whatnot, and like doing all sorts of things right now, which is amazing. But coming to placements, so placements is someone I personally feel is someone who is still kind of exploring and one knows that he likes engineering and development, let's say for example, but not sure what in development. Right? You can say that I like security, but what do you like in security? Do you like application security? Do you like SOC? Do you like cloud security? Like all of even the domains, for example, a lot of people are confused about key, do I actually like breaking things or do I like defending things, for example? So these things do not come into your head at that time. And again, honestly, I was not too different from this either. So the only thing luckily that I did was like hey, I want to do the job thing on my own. So I reached out again to, let's say, one of the companies that I reached out to was Appsecco again. Ki, hey, this time would it be possible? Can I intern with you again on a longer duration basis? And would it be possible to do cloud security stuff this time, or DevSecOps was something that I was really looking forward to. They're like, yes, I'm like, this is golden. So just let's go there. So that's where I went to eventually, and I interned at Appsecco as a DevSecOps engineering intern, however you want to term it. But that's what I did there. So DevSecOps was when I actually learned how to harvest the power of automation for security. So much so that I ended up giving like a bunch of talks around automating application security and like automation and security in general as well. So yeah, that's how
So
I did the whole placement thing, jumped through a bunch of hoops and ended up at
सो
Appsecco as a
सो
DevSecOps intern.
तो आपने कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट पे काम किया, क्या होता है डेवसेकऑप्स में, बेसिकली करना क्या होता है डेवसेकऑप्स इंजीनियर्स
Okay.
को,
So
एज अ
like
लेमैन लैंग्वेज में आपको किसी को समझाना हो तो क्या बेसिकली काम होता है?
the thing is कि मैं layman language में ही समझा सकता हूँ because it's also my understanding.
यस यस
So the thing is कि it's something that could be that different from person to person in terms of definition. Okay, so DevSecOps is like a culmination of development, security, and
सिक्योरिटी एंड
operation.
ऑपरेशंस.
Hopefully, everyone would have like gotten that from context. But eventually it means like a person who enables like security while not being a blocker for the other two. Like a typical uh, issue that like different teams that have with security teams is like they end up being blockers. Hey, you can't code like this is an injection thing. Hey, you can't deploy stuff like this because this is an insecure configuration on the cloud and whatnot. So DevSecOps basically means enabling these teams as well to be a stakeholder in security in a way, if you can think about it. For example, if I was able to like build a pipeline again, something that I did in the internship, that a developer themselves can, let's say, put it as a stage in their pipeline. Ki, hey, let's add a security stage. Let's scan whatever they're anyways doing at the end of the day, and let's say they find SQL, like there are a lot of sophisticated tools at this point. For example, SQL map, right? SQL map. So it is the tool that you'll go to if you want to exploit SQL injection. Now, for example, if I build a pipeline with that, and that tool can identify 5 issues in the pipeline itself. Now the developer saves time because he doesn't have to make a release for it to go to security engineer for him to do a pen test review or some kind of a security review, come back with those 5 and then tell him or her, right? So that enables them to work it out themselves. And this also helps the security team because now they don't have to like search for low hanging fruits. Like if an endpoint, if you just add that quote, single quote at the end, and if it breaks, it's the most vanilla case, right? But and while the engineer would find it, it's in a way waste of their time basically, because their brain power, actual brain usage could have been used to find so many more sophisticated bugs. For example, one example is chaining of issues, right? So let's say SSRF application on a server, chaining it to exfiltration of credentials and then credentials to like actual access to an AWS account. Individually, let's say different tools can find these individual bugs, but it's a human mind that can comprehend ki, hey, this chain together forms a severe, like a high or a critical kind of issue, right? Whereas independently, they might be mediums. I'm just giving an example. So that's the whole ideology behind DevSecOps of shifting security to the left, so that security is a part and stakeholder in earlier discussions in the development of software itself, instead of being the afterthought. The product has been released. Now let's do a pen test, which is what the traditional way of it is, right? You make a release, someone breaks it, and then you go back to the drawing board on how to fix it, and you do the cycle. It's also a very well-known fact that if you solve security issues before they release production, basically, it's cheaper also. So the moment you start solving these bugs in the drawing board itself, you'll save a lot of money eventually, from a business perspective as well, because these bugs never ended up. So security engineers were able to find more sophisticated bugs, which required actual human brain interaction with the application, for example, and those sophisticated bugs also got solved, right? And everyone in this whole paradigm, SDLC, was happy because nobody was blocked. Everyone was like, I got to do my job effortlessly, nobody blocked me basically. So that's, I don't know if it was layman, but that's my understanding of DevSecOps.
सो आपने कौन कौन से टूल्स और टेक्नोलॉजी पे काम किया है, आप लिस्ट डाउन कर सकते हैं डेवसेकऑप्स बेसिकली कि डेवसेकऑप्स में मैंने ये टूल्स और ये टेक्नोलॉजीज पे वर्क किया है?
I don't know if I can exhaustively say, but if you're working on the cloud, AWS CLI, you should definitely know. I mean, again, these are not security tools. I'm just telling you the tools that you would be very happy to like build some proficiency into, because then your life becomes easier. So AWS CLI and JQ. Okay, JQ is again like a CLI tool which parses JSONs, and you can put in a query or a path basically, and it will filter out content. So, for example, if you do a AWS EC2 describe instances thing, and it gives you a list of instances, and you just want the instance IDs for these instances, you can do a pipe to JQ, and then you can do a reservations array dot instances array, and then probably something called instance ID, and it will print just the instance IDs, and you have already like solved probably like 10 lines or 15 lines worth of Python code into like a one-liner CLI command. So that's one. Uske baad I will definitely suggest to like learn Python. If not anything else, like there's no harm in learning other languages. I stick to Python because that's just what I'm comfortable with. But there's Rust and Go and everything now. But stick like find one language that you can just like fall back on always to like just write any scripting or automation or something that you want to do. Uh, Apart from these, I also used Ansible at some places to like consolidate
Automations.
the automation into
Mm.
like a single place instead of like running different scripts. Used Ansible as an orchestration like wrapper around these scripts. For example, a lot of these ad hoc tasks, for example, copying files over and stuff like that, or syncing files. Ansible just takes care of it. So Ansible might be a thing, but again, not saying that these are the exact tools that you need to or should learn. There could be other things also. If you are working towards cloud security, Prowler is definitely something that you should check out. It's amazing. It gives you like all sorts of baseline checks that you can do against an AWS account, and you can kind of reverse engineer from that point forward. Ki, hey, this Prowler thing says ki, let's say IMDS v2 should be enabled for EC2 instance. Why does it say so in the first place? So it's sometimes daunting because I don't know, AWS has probably like what 200 plus services at this point. To know each and every one of them in depth, and then like figuring out all security controls, it's a very daunting looking task. Like if you just think about it, even I would like feel ki, yeah, this is too much work. But doing it the other way around, when you have a comprehensive list of checks and then you group them by services, okay, hey, this is like these 15 or so things are for EC2s. Let's reverse them. Okay, this is the recommendation, but why is this the recommendation and not something else? And what configuration does this recommendation kind of target? So that also helps. And apart from any tool, I would suggest reading a bunch of security benchmarks in the first place. CIS, AWS has its own CIS benchmark security best practices control ka list. That you should definitely read out. Most other cloud providers also have. GCP also has one. So whatever you want to begin with, do target that as well to like just skim through the index for the first thing. And of course, all of this is based on the premise of that you know like basics of cloud. So if that itself is lacking and you want to work towards cloud security, you should definitely check out like a primer, or maybe the documentation for the cloud itself, or just create an account. Most of these providers will give you like a either free tier like AWS or like free credits like GCP to just test out services. So just go crazy, figure out services, and just don't run a hole through your wallet. But the free tier and the credit should be enough for you to like get started and get a sense of what these things are doing. What's a container? What service runs a container? What service runs a server? What's a bucket in cloud? What's file storage? What's volume storage? All sorts of different configurations. Again, like because I'm saying it in like this succession, it might seem like ki bahut kuch hai yaar. But if you do this systematically, slowly, one service at a time, it's fairly straightforward. And these are like transferable cloud concepts,
ओके
so that
ओके.
should also help you out.
सो आपने सेकंड कंपनी क्लाउडल ज्वाइन करी, वहाँ पे एज अ क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी स्पेशलिस्ट काम किया, तो वहाँ पे आपने कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट पे काम किया?
The whole paradigm kind of shifted from Appsecco to Kloudle because Appsecco was a services or a consulting company versus Kloudle, which was a product company whose product itself was like a security product basically, right? So the whole goal of using Kloudle was for anyone who uses Kloudle or any organization, they'd have a better understanding of their cloud assets, which would allow them to have deeper visibility. Which again, like all of these are chained basically. Ki if you have like greater visibility, you will have a way to like kind of take a look at the holistic view of your infrastructure, how it looks, and what kind of misconfiguration that exist in your cloud. What's a typical thing that's, let's say, repeating. There was a concept of automated remediation built baked into the product itself and everything. So because again, Cloudle was a startup when I joined. Like it was from the same founders as Appsecco. So I when I joined them, I was also doing a lot of other stuff apart from security. So my uh, what do you call it, job description as such was not like written in stone per se. For example, when I began, I was also working on the actual product backend itself. So I wrote a lot of things there. And like I would say version one, or maybe like just behind version one. And then like actual software developers, not someone who just like knows how to script stuff out, join, and then they like actually like build it into like a proper full-fledged product. I was also handling most, if not all, of the SRE work. For example, deploying all infrastructure related to different tenants, anything that we needed to maintain the product internally, everything around that. And then of course, the security aspect of all things itself. You can call it intelligence behind the platform itself. But this was not something that I was doing alone. There were other, of course, engineers as well. And what we were trying to do is like build or do R&D on what sorts of misconfigurations that can exist for various services, and kind of build evaluation rules and methodologies for the same. And yeah, and then put them into the product itself.
Okay,
So
okay.
that was like what was happening at Cloudle with me.
ओके ओके सो इसके बाद आपने क्रेड ज्वाइन करी एज ए क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी इंजीनियर, तो वो
Correct.
कितना डिफरेंट था बाकी प्रीवियस काम से, और वहाँ पे क्या किया क्रेड में, आप क्या काम कर रहे हो रिसेंटली?
The main difference was that okay, like to give the gist of all three, Appsecco mein, let's say some people would come and they'll be like, hey, we have this problem, XYZ problem. Can you help me figure out a way to solve for this? I mean, this is like again like a gross simplification, but that's how typically it works. You can of course then uncover other things and then solve for them as well. But like the basic gist of it is ki someone comes to you with a problem, you try to help them out because you have the expertise in that particular field. Okay. Cloudle it shifted because it was a product company, but it was a security product. Okay. So I was contributing to what would constitute the product ka value itself, in the sense that if I say ki, hey, this is a misconfiguration, because again, it comes from the being let's say a subject matter expert or whatever you want to call it. But to be able to say ki, hey, this thing looks like a misconfiguration, we should have it in our product. Because if I was using Cloudle, I would want to know ki if my, let's say, servers are doing this example. Okay. When it comes to Cred, now Cred, it's a product, it's again also a product company. But the main difference is, or the when I say main, it sounds slightly less significant. I'll say the biggest difference is that at Cred, I'm not only responsible to solve for the issue that we have found, okay, or to secure Cred, but also to find, or like let's say hunt for these issues that can exist. So there is no one person that will come up to me and say ki, I mean, of course, that could also be a case that someone comes to you and tells you ki, hey, like we are seeing this particular issue, maybe take a look at it. But the idea is that we proactively go out and find these issues ourselves without anyone ever having to like tell us, and then solve for them. So although the solution part of it might be like overlapping with most other places, but the biggest change is to develop this practice of actually finding those issues yourself, looking at a particular, let's say, API, or like a deployment architecture and figuring out ki what could go wrong here, instead of someone telling you ki, hey, this is something that has been going wrong, how do we solve for this? So that's the biggest difference, I would say.
ओके, सो आपने कौन कौन सी टूल्स और टेक्नोलॉजी पे काम कर रहे हैं आप रिसेंटली इन क्रेड?
This particular question might not be the best way to uh, ascertain like what kind of value you can get out of a tool, because that's again, if you know Python or any other language for that matter, most of the time you can script stuff out. So whether you consider that script a tool or not is a question, whether Python was the tool or not is a question, right? So the I mean, the skill that you probably need to look for is, or like people should look for is like problem solving. If I give you a problem and you're able to solve it, that is the skill in itself, if you think about it. How elegant that solution is a question now. So let's say someone just like, for example, a fresher might do a hacky script of doing something. Some senior engineer or like mid-level engineer might, okay, hey, there is this tool, I can just run it and extract the output and then do some processing on top of it. And then there will be people who will be able to look at the architecture and be like, this problem started way back in the design phase of, let's say, the deployment itself, and it should be solved from that point forward or something like that, right? So the way of solving for issues might be different, but and that could also be dependent on the experience, but the idea is to be able to solve a problem. Again, like if I talk about the tools, the number of like technologies I will be working with is like lesser, in fact, because for scripting purposes I would use Python, again my favorite thing to go back to. It allows me to call APIs, automate, work with JSONs, run automation, anything for that matter, right? So that pretty much and of course again AWS CLI and JQ are like my favorite, because that just allows me to like save away a lot of scripting things around working with configurations around the cloud itself. I would say bash scripting also might be a thing that one should know to write shell scripts, because Python might not always suffice, or it might just be an overkill for some simple task where you can just throw a what do you call it, a bash file or a bash script basically. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. But I mean, that's security specific, but I'll also say that it might be a good idea to like learn containers, Docker, because it just makes a lot of sense when you're like, let's say, building your own tools also, because again, now that's just a replicable environment that you can just push across to your team, put it on the cloud, easier deployment, and all sorts of like benefits that you can reap out of it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's also something that you might be able to learn fairly quickly also, and just like get on.
सो आपका इंटरव्यू एक्सपीरियंस कैसा रहा कि डोमेन चेंज करने में कितनी डिफिकल्टीज आई, क्या क्या क्वेश्चन टैकल हुए आपको जब आपने DevSecOps से क्लाउड में एंट्री मारी?
So even during DevSecOps, I was working on cloud security itself. So thankfully, it was not a domain switch per se, more of a title change, you can say, right? The difference was definitely on the front of, as I said, like the hunting the problems part. Like if you come to me with like a problem, I will be able to do some research and get back to you. Okay, hey, you know what? This is potentially 3 ways that you can probably solve this problem. But finding the issues themselves was a thing that I had to prep for, because I mean, that's just how it goes basically. Like if you are a guy who's supposed to secure a product, right, be it whatever company that you work at, right, you are responsible for finding those issues and then solving for them. So that skill is something that I worked on top of on, and it also helped out because a lot of these questions that I faced during my switch from Kloudle to like not just Cred, but like during that phase, I was of course interviewing at other places also. So many of these times, it was not a very specific question. Key, tell me 10 things or 10 secure configurations about EC2, right? It was many a time scenario based. Key, hey, let's say you want to build this hypothetical service from scratch, right? what would be the security considerations that you'll take into your while designing this thing? And that now becomes a problem solving question on the ability to find those problems themselves. For example, if it's like, if you want to you have a data farm and you want to deploy your own EC2 like service, basically cloud based server rental, right? For example, what are the security considerations that you'll have? So now you have like this whole breadth of things that you can look at. You can look at inter server process communication. So one tenant's server should not be able to read someone else's server configuration and things running within it. Volume is segregation. So again, like the data I store should not be accessible to other servers. Encryption, sharing of those encryption keys, whether you use the same key for encrypting all tenants' data, maintain different key, all sorts of random things will start coming to your head. So that was the biggest change that I kind of faced, or like kind of prepped about while I was switching to a product company.
वर्क कल्चर कैसा रहता है कि प्रोडक्ट कंपनी आपके प्रोस्पेक्टिव में कैसी रहती है, और सर्विस बेस्ड कितना लर्निंग प्रोस्पेक्टिव रहता है कि आप कहाँ ज़्यादा सीख पाते हैं?
So you'd learn in both places. There is no concept of you'd learn more. What you need to figure out is how you like learning things. Do you like to learn things breadth first and then tackle them in depth? Or do you want to do one thing full, one end to end, and then move on to the next thing, right? So depending upon that, consulting might be a place where you again, like based on the assumption of that you have this assortment of clients or customers or whatever you want to call them, and all of these come to you with different problems in different contexts in different clouds. For example, this gives you a whole breadth first approach, right? So you learn about a lot of things, maybe not deep enough, but you learn about a lot of things. Like you build a lot of context, then you can go and hey, this looked interesting when I was solving it at work. Then you, like, for example, in your own time or even at work, like you can like develop a deeper understanding of that particular problem set. In product companies it's slightly different, because when you pick a problem, you'd want to solve for it end to end. I mean, more often than not, it could also be ad hoc. So you might just want to you want to do an easy fix for certain things. But typically, how it would be like you'll pick one product, you'll solve it end to end. You could do multiple of those simultaneously, depending upon how multitasking a person you are. But that's the biggest difference. So you'd learn in both places, and if you think about it, your learning is not hampered in any of them. Like if I even work at a product company, I can still like explore those services by myself. It's just that in a consulting it becomes easier because I get those problem like basically served to me on a platter, right? And I don't have to like find those issues myself or like read about. You have to read about to build that depth, but you don't have to go and find them alag se. And goes same thing goes vice versa.
So in your perspective, why and when to change any company?
I personally have a lot of curiosity on how things work and everything, but so I read a lot as well, and there are some interesting, I don't know if it's quotes that I've read or something like that, but like eventually, like if you work at a place, you should also look at if you are developing as well or not, right? It could be in different means. It doesn't always have to be career. A career in the sense of technical know-how. For example, all of us starting out at freshers, uh, like most of the crowd will be working on technical stuff, right? Then you might develop, let's say you want to be a project or a project manager, for example, versus ending up as an architect, security architect for that matter. So like you start off as a security person and then the paths diverge. But if your company can help and support and you feel whatever path you're deciding for yourself, you are growing, be it in your technical abilities, be it in your goals that you have set for yourself towards your learning or like personal development, upskilling, however you want to put it. the moment it stops might be a good time to like maybe find a new place that can help you do that as well. And this is though on assuming like everything is all hunky dory on the other front. There are personal reasons that people might have. For example, like I don't know, like for example, you don't have a supportive team there, or the company has a culture that you personally don't like. So might be a time for you to switch again. So again, it comes down to a very, very personal level of context on when to switch for a companies, but you should keep on looking that you're actually at least growing wherever you're working. You're just not this just another cog in the wheel that whenever required can be replaced, because if that's the case, then you've not really upskilled as such. You're just another person in that company.
What certification you did, or certification are more important, or experience guy, which is valuable to any company?
So interestingly enough, I have not done any certification,
Okay.
and it's worked out for me, at least so far. Uh, but I personally believe experience in the domain that you're working in would be more valuable most times than certifications. But certifications are not useless to. I mean, again, like there are two kind of certification. One that just exists for the sake of saying you're certified, and the others that actually grant you some authority over a particular subject or a domain, right? So typically, if you were to ask me, I don't mind if you don't have any certification, but then your experience should be relevant to security. For example, if you're talking about a security specific role, right? Uh, when certifications might be a good idea, or at least one example that comes to my head, I mean, right away is, let's say you want to switch your roles, right? Now, of course, like if you worked as, let's say, SRE or a DevOps engineer or even developer for that matter, and now you want to become a security engineer. So your experience might be can maybe transcend into security in certain ways, but your experience doesn't count here because technically you have not worked in security. Your experience is not in security, right? So in that case, to supplement that lack of experience in the domain that you're trying to switch to, certifications might be a good idea. An example would be like AWS in depth because you work as an SRE, right? But you want to move into cloud security, that focus as a cloud security engineer who focuses on AWS. Now, AWS security specialty might be able to gap or like bridge that gap that you have in your experience uh, to your actual knowledge that you already possess. Hey, I know how to work on AWS. I know how services work, different configurations that exist. This certification will allow me to learn on a very expedited exponential growth manner that, hey, you know what, this is how security works on AWS, or these are the services I've been working so far, but now I know the secure configurations or how to secure these things in the first place. So that can help you augment a lot of gap that you might have had, because again, like your domain was never security. But now
Okay.
compare that with, let's say, you're a 3 year experience SRE with a AWS certification versus someone who's been doing cloud security in AWS for 3 years and has no certification. So now it becomes like you yourself would be thinking ki, like maybe he knows more. So when you do an interview, that does come into like your head. Ideally it should not, to be very honest, but it does come to your head, and more often than not that experienced guy will have encountered caveats, issues, and all sorts of other things, because again the certification at the end of the day is a theoretical bridge, right, versus experience where he has built that bridge of experience, right?
Okay. Okay.
So it will help you for sure if you're switching domains, but again, like I would not uh, what do you call it, uh, give you high hopes about ki if you just have a AWS security specialty certification, you are now the authority on AWS security, and you are at par with, let's say, someone with 3, 4, 5 years of experience. That doesn't fly more in most cases than others.
Which conferences you attend and talks? It is important or not if you attend any conferences and talks?
So I have a different take. I'm not sure more what most people like think about when they think about conferences. But I look at them for two major perspectives. One is to share knowledge. So, of course, most of us have uh, been standing on the shoulders of giant, as the saying goes. A lot of knowledge was already consolidated for us. We did not discover SQLi, as in, like, we did not invent the, let's say, the class of bugs. Right now, if someone wants to start out learning about SQL injection, they just have to do a Google search versus a time when Google didn't exist, right? But SQL injections did, for example. So, for that very reason, I like to share if I have like very some nice caveat, some nice catchy thing that I kind of saw and might be of interest to other people. I look at conferences as a way to, or as a medium to be able to share that out as well. Second is primarily for me is networking. So in conferences, it's like again like for me to like go on LinkedIn and search cloud security, find people who are relevant, and then do multiple levels of what do you call it, filtering, and then connecting with them and then talking is like a very long process. Whereas let's say you go to a conference, there's a cloud security track going on, everyone there is cloud security, so you just like talk with 10 people, maybe they help you in the next job search, or maybe you can work or collaborate on a project or something. So networking is the second bit that I really like. I'm talking about conferences.
Okay, so आपने कौन-कौन सी conferences attend करी हैं?
Honestly, in person, I've only been to NullCon. That was back in 2020.
Okay.
And then I've spoken at a bunch of them online because of COVID restrictions. I mean, most of them were online in themselves. Like they didn't even have an offline presence at that time. So yeah, but I'm looking forward to like things actually opening back up again. So hopefully I can travel a little bit and then attend more in-person conferences.
आप कौन-कौन से resources follow करते हैं learn new things and stay updated रहने के लिए?
Most of it is from newsletters. So for example, there is TLDR Sec, right? That you can read. There's a bunch of Twitter handles that give you updates on security, specifically focusing on AWS for that matter. You can look at that. I follow a couple of people. For example, Scott Piper is one that I personally like consider like a very huge authority on security, talking about AWS. So all of these combined, and then of course LinkedIn पे किसी का कुछ research अगर आ गया. I have a bunch of colleagues. Plus, my team members also keep an eye out for interesting stuff, interesting tools out there. So when they share it, we kind of consolidate it all together and share it on a common channel that we have. So that's pretty much how I do it. There's no right or wrong way. Whatever works for you, I guess.
Okay, one last question. कौन-कौन सी चीजें beginners को करनी चाहिए और जो security domain में नहीं है कि मतलब ये चीज तो आनी चाहिए as a security guy, as a road map कि ये
Okay.
चीजें तो करना.
So when you say security guy, because I am a cloud security engineer, I would say, answer that on a cloud security perspective. Definitely learn about OS, networks, communications, because OS hardening will be a thing you'll be doing when you're working on cloud. Like when you deploy a server, how do you harden the OS itself, or what kind of networks can interoperate, right? How do you then of course learn about AWS. Like AWS captures the majority of the market. So if you're looking ever into getting into cloud security and thinking of which cloud provider to start off with, my personal recommendation will always be to go to AWS. Just start with that. They also have a free tier program for the first year, so you can run a bunch of services, actually run them and not cost you anything. You can do that. And once you have developed this base of hey, what is this network, you have launched a bunch of services, figured out how they work, what kind of configurations, rules, settings they have, Then you can take a look at best practices. So AWS itself again has a list of best practices that it suggests for security control services, and then security configurations for those particular services. So वहां से you can reverse extrapolate on what configurations are supposed to be secure as per AWS, and then figure out why yourself. Right. Again, like for example, S3 buckets should not be public, but why? Just if you just ask this question and do a like 10 minutes of googling, you'll find that answer for sure. But to do that, take that effort will allow you to like fast track your like learning curve towards cloud security, like very, I mean, much more faster than doing the traditional route of like doing all things from scratch and then taking every setting and then figuring out which setting which secure configuration. It's just too much branching of that tree. So just take the end goal, come back. It's just that you need to have a foundation of understanding what configuration in the first place. So that's my suggestion. And once you have that, towards the job front, I will suggest ki start early, find an internship for yourself, because it's much easier to find an internship and convert it to a full-time role as compared to finding a full-time role from the get-go without experience. Because internship mein people know there is going to be a lack of, let's say, understanding or some context in terms of security, and the word internship ensures that they will have that view when they're evaluating you on like taking you up or not, right? Whereas when it comes to job, you're expected to be able to deliver outcomes very soon, if not right away, when you join a company. So that becomes slightly more difficult to like get without experience. So from a career perspective, I would suggest that start as soon if you can, start with an internship and then get converted, and then move forward, of course, and just keep on continue to learn, because cloud as an environment is very dynamic. Like new services come up all the time. Services ka interoperability keeps on changing, and then services configurations themselves kind of get evaluated. For example, IMDS v2 now is not a new thing, but there was a time where there was no IMDS v2 for AWS EC2 instances, and now there is. So now there are security recommendations around that as well. So that's something to definitely keep on like just reevaluating what you know, and if there is a change in that knowledge, so keep yourself updated in whatever form works for you.
ओके, थैंक यू सो मच आयुष, आपने अपना इतना वैल्यूबल टाइम दिया और इतनी सारी इंसाइट दी हमारे.
Thanks a lot, man. It was really fun, and yeah, I'm really flattered to be actually interviewed on a podcast. So I hope it was valuable for you as well as your audience.
श्योर, काफ़ी कुछ सीखने को मिला एज अ क्लाउड सिक्योरिटी इंजीनियर, क्या कैसे कैसे चीज़ें करते हैं.